Business lessons from history's most notorious figures. Now that's something they don't teach in MBA programs. But what if the principles of modern corporate success were first mastered by a cocaine empire?
Let me start by acknowledging we're examining these business principles while completely condemning the violence and criminality. It's like studying military strategy without endorsing war.
Well, that's exactly right. And what immediately jumps out is how Griselda Blanco understood something that even today's Fortune 500 companies struggle with: vertical integration. When Amazon controls everything from warehouses to delivery drones, they're using the same principle, just legally.
That reminds me of how Tesla approached the electric vehicle market, controlling batteries, charging networks, and even mining relationships.
And look at Apple. They've taken it even further by designing their own chips now. You know, it's fascinating how these modern tech giants are essentially doing what Blanco did, but for smartphones and EVs instead of, well, you know.
So what do you make of her second lesson about innovation? The way she constantly adapted to changing circumstances.
Well, take Netflix as a perfect example. They didn't wait for Blockbuster to crush them. They saw streaming coming and completely reinvented themselves. Then they saw content creation becoming crucial and pivoted again. It's that same principle of staying ahead of market changes.
That's exactly like how Microsoft transformed under Satya Nadella, from a defensive competition-crushing stance to embracing cloud computing and open source.
And speaking of transformation, let's talk about her point regarding reputation. You know, companies can spend decades building trust and lose it in one viral moment. Just look at how BP's reputation tanked after the Deepwater Horizon spill. It cost them over $65 billion in damages.
Yikes! And then there's the contrast of how Johnson & Johnson handled the Tylenol crisis, pulling every product immediately despite the $100 million cost.
Exactly. And that connects perfectly to her fourth lesson about loyalty and consequences. Modern companies create sophisticated incentive structures, like how Google offers stock options worth millions to retain top talent.
Though hopefully with less permanent consequences than Blanco's approach.
Right? Well, her fifth lesson about diversification is particularly relevant today. Look at Disney. They've spread across theme parks, movies, streaming, and merchandise. When COVID hit their parks, other divisions helped them survive.
That's such a perfect example of strategic diversification. You know, studies show companies with diverse revenue streams are 30% more likely to survive economic downturns.
And that brings us to her final lesson about knowing when to walk away. Like how Kodak, and this is mind-blowing, actually invented digital photography, but couldn't let go of their traditional film business. They filed for bankruptcy in 2012 after being worth $31 billion in the 1990s.
That's a fascinating example of how believing your own legend, as Blanco put it, can lead to downfall.
The psychology behind these decisions is remarkable. Studies from Harvard Business School show that leaders become 40% more risk-averse after major successes. They start protecting what they have instead of looking for what's next.
Well, that protective instinct makes sense from a human perspective, but markets don't care about past successes.
You know what's interesting? Some companies are actively fighting this tendency. Like Google X, their moonshot factory, which intentionally takes on projects with a 90% chance of failure. They understand that innovation requires embracing uncertainty.
That approach to calculated risk-taking really shows how these principles can be applied ethically to create sustainable value.
And sustainability is key here. In legitimate business, success isn't measured in quarters, it's measured in decades. Look at companies like 3M or IBM that have survived over 100 years by constantly reinventing themselves.
The long-term perspective really separates sustainable businesses from exploitative ones, doesn't it?
Absolutely right. And that might be our biggest takeaway. Business principles are tools, and their impact depends entirely on how we choose to use them. The same understanding of market dynamics that Blanco used destructively can build something positive and lasting.
Now that's the kind of business empire worth building, one that creates value rather than extracts it.
Looking at these lessons through that lens, we can see how modern businesses can use them to innovate, adapt, and create value while maintaining ethical standards. It's about building something that outlasts any individual leader.
And contributes positively to society along the way.